Right now, you are sitting in a warm, cozy room without even trying. The heat flows naturally, and there is a thick coat by your door that required no hunting to make. But what if all of that comfort was suddenly ripped away from you tonight? Imagine being left with just your bare skin in a winter so brutal it could kill you in your sleep. For hundreds of thousands of years, this extreme, deadly cold was the everyday reality for your ancestors. They survived real, relentless ice ages where massive glaciers covered entire continents. Yet, against all odds, they made it, and your very existence is the ultimate proof of their victory. Every single one of them won a savage fight against a winter they absolutely could not afford to lose. So, how did a soft, hairless animal from the African heat survive the worst weather this planet ever produced? This is one of the greatest survival stories ever told, though almost nobody knows how close we came to extinction. Let's be completely honest about the terrifying conditions these early humans actually faced. To them, winter was not a chilly afternoon spent relaxing around a cozy, cracking campfire. The last ice age reached its absolute, brutal peak around 26,000 to 19,000 years ago. A thick sheet of ice sat heavily on top of Europe, Asia, and North America. The landscape was flat, frozen, and completely open, with no trees to stop the howling wind. Food vanished entirely for months at a time, and human bodies simply are not built for that. We don't have thick fur, we lack a seal's insulating fat, and we cannot hibernate like bears. If you strip a modern human naked in that kind of cold, they have hours, not days, to live. The animals around our ancestors were perfectly evolved and beautifully made for the extreme cold. Mammoths had dense fur, cave bears could sleep through it, and reindeer could simply walk away. On paper, humans should have been the very first things to die when the temperature plummeted. We had the wrong body in the wrong place at the worst possible time in history. But we possessed a brilliant brain that could plan and capable hands that could build what we lacked. That powerful combination turned out to be just enough to keep the human race alive. It wasn't a single clever trick that saved us, but a whole pile of critical adaptations. Everything started with fire, because absolutely nothing else works without a reliable heat source. Humans had already been using fire for a very long time, at least 300,000 to 400,000 years. By the time the Ice Age arrived, fire was no longer a luxury, it was life itself. When scientists dug up Ice Age hearths in Ukraine, they expected to find rough, simple fire pits. Instead, they discovered highly engineered fireplaces that had burned at over 600 degrees Celsius. When wood ran dangerously low on the open tundras, they burned animal fat and bones instead. Fire gave them life-saving heat, cooked their food, hardened tools, and extended the short days. Next, they figured out a genius way to carry that vital warmth everywhere they went. The problem with a campfire is that you cannot take it with you into the deep snow. So, humans did something no other animal could do, they stole the warmth of others. At first, it was simple, raw animal skins carelessly thrown over their shivering shoulders. In fact, humans were skinning massive cave bears for fur in northern Europe 300,000 years ago. We know this because of distinct cut marks left on the bear paw bones during skinning. Those heavy hides made excellent windproof cloaks, but loose skins still leak critical body heat. The ultimate fix appeared around 30,000 years ago, and it was incredibly small. It was the invention of the sewing needle, crafted from thin bone or mammoth ivory. This tiny tool meant humans could finally sew tightly fitted clothes with sealed, protective seams. A loose blanket and a perfectly fitted winter coat are two entirely different things for survival. Early modern humans had much better fitting clothes than Neanderthals, which likely saved our species. They used deer hide to cut the freezing wind for mittens and waterproof leather boots. Before stepping out into the blinding white, hunters rubbed thick animal fat over their faces. This greasy tallow sealed the skin, held in heat, and blocked the biting wind. To prevent devastating snow blindness, they carved tiny slits into pieces of bone or wood. These ancient bone goggles were essentially the world's very first primitive sunglasses. While everyone pictures cavemen hiding deep underground, the historical truth is much more impressive. Across the frozen plains of Ukraine and Russia, there were no natural caves and no wood. So, these resourceful people built sturdy houses out of the bones of mammoth giants. At a famous site called Mezhirek, archaeologists found round houses built entirely of bone. Massive mammoth skulls and leg bones were sunk into the ground to form a heavy base. Long ribs and curved tusks arched upward to create the strong dome-like roof frame. Hundreds of heavy bones were packed with thick hides, turf, and insulating earth. These structures held heat so well that an entire family could stay comfortable inside. The design was incredibly clever, featuring an advanced cold trap doorway dug below the floor. Because cold air is heavy, it sank into the entrance while warm air rose to the sleeping area. They also strategically used thick-packed snow as a highly effective natural insulator. Long before the igloo was perfected, they knew a snowbank was warmer than the open air. Where they chose to build mattered immensely, often seeking shelter inside dense pine forests. Trees blocked a massive amount of wind, making the brutal days surprisingly calm inside the woods. To seal the tiny drafts, they packed the gaps with mud, moss, and sticky pine pitch. Staying warm kept them alive through the night, but winter's slower killer was starvation. For months, there was absolutely nothing to gather and very little wildlife left to hunt. So, our ancestors became master planners, learning to preserve food long before winter arrived. When they made a massive kill, they frozen the excess meat directly in the snow. They smoked large chunks of meat, dried jerky, and safely stored dried wild fruits. Food was buried deep in underground pits, creating effective, power-free winter cellars. They even weighed mammoth meat down with rocks, sinking it into freezing ponds to preserve it. This acted like a natural, reliable refrigerator that could never break down in a storm. They wasted absolutely nothing, squeezing every single life-saving calorie out of an animal carcass. Their hunting strategies were highly organized, involving intense teamwork and strategic fire. Near a tall limestone rock in France, hunters trapped entire herds of wild horses for millennia. They would kill big, dry the meat immediately, and save it for the freezing months ahead. Unlike modern humans, these ancient people lived their entire lives preparing for the winter. Today, we assume the power will always stay on, and we are shocked when a storm hits. They were never surprised, and they heavily relied on each other to survive the dark. Many people lived tightly packed under one single roof to maximize precious body heat. In the Ice Age, a person with a private room wasn't lucky, they were freezing to death. It was the isolated individuals who usually perished first during a sudden, severe cold snap. However, this desperate struggle for survival was often brutally violent and dark. When resources vanished, humans sometimes became the ultimate threat to other humans. We know for a historical fact that some ancient groups turned to cannibalism to survive. When starvation pushed them to the absolute brink, they resorted to the most horrific measures. They also learned to share tight living spaces with heavy livestock for extra warmth. In brutal European winters, peasants brought cows and sheep directly into the ground floor. The immense body heat from the animals rose up, warming the family sleeping right above them. Sometimes, the extreme cold went so deep that human biology itself began to physically adapt. The Yagan people of South America lived in freezing weather while wearing almost no clothes. To survive, their metabolisms ran incredibly hot, generating intense heat from the inside out. They rested in a deep, tight squatting position to minimize body surface heat loss. But the strangest theory of all suggests that some early humans actually hibernated. At a Spanish site called the Pit of Bones, scientists studied fossils from 430,000 years ago. The bone damage shows strange, cyclical seasonal marks where growth completely stopped. This is the exact same biological pattern seen in animals that enter deep hibernation. Without enough fat to survive, these humans might have slept through the winter in caves. While many scientists still argue against this theory, the evidence cannot be easily ignored. For hundreds of thousands of years, making it to spring was never a guarantee. Every single winter was a lethal test, and failing that test meant immediate death. What is truly mind-blowing is how fast we changed things on this grand timeline. In just a few thousand years, we went from stacking mammoth bones to pressing a button for heat. The deadliest enemy our ancestors ever faced is now a minor inconvenience on our morning walk. We conquered winter so completely that we forgot it was ever a war we were losing.